Questions for Chip Kelly? Front row middle, Bill Rabinowitz, Columbus Dispatch. Sorry about that, Coach.
No problem. We haven't talked to you since the last game. It didn't go the way you expected. When you look at that, what do you think, and how does that shape what you're going to do for this game coming up?
Well, I think this game's different. Every game takes on their own identity, but obviously you go back through either your last game all the time and then look at what you did well and then what you didn't do well, and then how do we correct that moving forward, and that's part of the process, and so because there's been so much time between the games, you've had a good chance. You're not allowed to go out on the road and recruit. Normally after your last game, you're on the road and you're scrambling and a lot of different things going on. You actually don't hit the road till January now with a new recruiting schedule. So we've dissected the last game, understand what we have to do to play better in that game, because we didn't play at our best and we didn't put our players in position to make the plays that they needed to make in that game, and that falls on us as a coaching staff.
When you watched the way you called the game or analyzed something, what would you change things? What you do?
Yeah, you always change things. I mean, I think if anybody says no, we wouldn't change anything, well, then you'd still lose the game. So that doesn't, I left guys to get bullheaded and no, we did the right thing. We didn't. You always have things back, and that's the same thing in every game we play. You always look back at it and say, what could I have done differently? Sometimes you're winning games by a lot, but you're still not playing to your best of your ability. So you always got to kind of analyze that and go through it and say, what if we're in this situation again? We were in coming out more than we had been. I think kind of the ebb and flow of that game was different. I think we only had 21 plays of first and second down, and normally you have a lot more than those. We were coming out or going in, a lot of third downs and conversions. So really looking at the situational stuff and do we carry more in those situations so that when they come up, sometimes you look at it statistically, you're only going to be coming out for 3 to 4 plays, but we were down there a lot, in that game, and you probably have to carry more in those situations so that you can execute a little bit better down in those situations. So those are all lessons that you learn after playing a game like that.
Stephen Means, Cleveland.com.
You and Ryan and plenty of coaches have said this, taking what the defense gives you, that's playing smart. But are there times when maybe when you have some of the weapons you have, you can dictate things a little bit more and allow your players to be put into positions where they can be what you've recruited and developed them to be? Do you feel like you guys did a good job of that against Michigan?
No, we didn't. I think you got to get the ball to those guys. We were really talented on the perimeter, and sometimes people are scheming up to take things away, play too deep and double cover some guys and force you to kind of play a little bit left-handed, and I think you still have to find ways, and we have to be creative enough that you can still get the ball in those guys' hands.
Rob Aller, Columbus Dispatch.
Yeah, Chip, you've done this a long time. You've been an assistant, you've been the head coach. After a tough loss like that, how do you keep the team buoyant? How do you keep things from fracturing and just moving ahead and not sort of sulking, I guess?
Yeah, I think when you look at what is ahead of us, we're one of only 12 teams in the country that has a chance to compete for a national championship. So, that's been the sole focus of the team since the game. I think you understand that we got 2 losses on the season by 4 points combined, but we still have an opportunity to finish the way we want to finish, and that starts with the game this Saturday against Tennessee, and a really good Tennessee team. So every team that's left right now in this tournament is a really good football team. So I think it may have been a different outcome, and I think at times it is a different outcome the way the old system was when only 4 teams made the only top 4 made it with a chance to win the national championship. Now that there's 12, I think that's a little bit of a different mindset that we have to kind of embrace and then say, hey, what do we do now? And the big thing for this group is from the day we've started with our prep from Tennessee, they've been focused on one thing, and that's playing Tennessee. And, we got a whole week of work that we have to continue to go through this week and be ready to play Saturday night at 8 o'clock.
Is there a grieving process, or you just can't have that with the timing of it all?
Losses hurt everybody, and there's always that process. And I think sometimes it's easier when there's a game immediately, because you can't sulk very long. But, in this one, probably hung with you a little bit longer just because, the last time we played was on November 30th, and now we're not playing till the 20th. So there was a little bit more time in between. But, since we've started back up with our prep from Tennessee, that last game is behind us now, and we got to move forward.
Austin Ward, podcast. Chip.
you guys were so productive in those 2-minute drills and pushing the football down the field throughout the course of the year, and we're again against Michigan. That was the bright spot drive. Why is it that you can't just do that all the time?
That's a great question. No, it's football. I mean, it doesn't always happen the way you think it's going to happen, and it doesn't happen the way that it get laid out. You know, you have to be able to adjust because they adjust. You know, if they do the same things that they did at the end of the first half, at the end of the second half, you know, and then you're anticipating that also. You're trying to figure out what they're going to do and what you're going to do, and that's the beauty of the game. You still have to play it out during the game. So, you know, you wish it always worked out that way. You know, we've had some really, really good successful 2-minute drives during the season, but in a situation where we really needed it, we didn't. And, you know, and that's so you got to go back. What did we call? What was our protection situation? What routes combinations did we run? Where were we? What did they? How did they deploy? You know, what was their blitz operation like? What was their pass rush like? What type of coverages are they playing? And then, you know, if we get to that situation again against another team in that same situation, you can, you know, go back to that experience and that we've been through this before. This is kind of how they played us, and I think we're starting to see that again, so we got to make the proper adjustments.
Far left, Jake Trotter, ESPN.
Yeah, Chip, how would you compare the pressure that the head coach at Ohio State faces to anything you've seen in football, and especially after a loss to Michigan? And how's Ryan handling that, like you said, with the playoff and a chance to win the national championship ahead?
Yeah, he's been, obviously it hurts. He understands the weight of what this position is, being the head coach at Ohio State. It's different than probably some other places, as you noted. But I think Ryan's done a great job with it. You know, I think he has to. You always look to your leader, you know, and how does the leader handle it? And I think our players kind of thrive off of him and kind of what his mindset is, and you know what the magnitude of that game is, but then our ability to move on because there are other games. And like we said, we have an opportunity to play 4 more if we do what we're supposed to do. So I think he's done a really good job with it. It is a difficult situation, but I think he's the man, and he's done a great job with it.
Right behind him, Steve Hellwagen, 24/7 Sports.
Hey, Coach, after the Michigan game, a lot was made that you guys netted something like 20 yards on 18 running plays between the guard gaps, whatever it was. Can a play caller get into a rut sometimes, or was there something that you saw on film that you thought that was going to be a vulnerable part of their offense to attack, and I guess spin that forward for Tennessee? It seems like they're very similar.
Yeah, a play caller can get into a rut. That's a very valid point. You know, I think sometimes you kind of go in with the mindset you have to establish a run to win a football game. You know, maybe that's not the case. Sometimes you got to kind of go away from some of the norms and say, hey, maybe if we throw it a little bit more, in hindsight after you go through it, and say maybe we could have done this a little bit differently, because you're always going to go back through it. There's not a time when we've played a game and you're going back through and saying, man, we played the perfect game. You've never played the perfect game, never called the perfect game. So you're always looking at how do we improve and how do we make this better. You're right. I think Tennessee they're 5th nationally defensively in both scoring and total defense. The number 1 third down defense in the country, number 1 red zone defense in the country. So we're playing a really formidable defensive group coming in here that's really well coached, and they've got good players at all 3 levels. So that's going to be a challenge for us again this week, and our players are excited about that opportunity.
After the hit on Howard, did you have the same confidence in him? Because there were a couple 3rd downs, 3rd and long after that, where you guys ran the ball coming out and also going in the red zone. And he didn't seem like the same player after that big hit.
Yeah, we always have confidence in Will. I think, you know, he's the leader of our team on the offensive side of the ball, and has had a tremendous season. You know, and I think sometimes those 3rd and extra long situations, whether it be coming out, you're trying to protect the ball, you don't want to turn it over in that situation, give your punter a little bit more opportunity to play the field position game and get the ball past midfield, and knowing that we have a really good defense and we're confident when we put them back on the field. And then sometimes like the one in the it was a draw play on a 3rd and long, which is sometimes is a normal call against a pass rush team, and then we were just short on it.
Right behind him, Pat 40, Sports Illustrated.
Chip, you mentioned coming out and going in. Is that the traditional red zones? Is that 0 to 20, or is that a different yard perimeter?
Yeah, 0 to 20. You know, and we were coming out more than we've been in most games. And then we also had a few opportunities inside the red zone, and we got to capitalize there. We talked to our we know all the time that, you know, no STPs, no sacks, no turnovers, no penalties down there. We got to come away with points, and we didn't come away with enough points, obviously.
How much of game plan is dictated by that sort of field position?
It's all based upon really the data of how many reps a game over the course of a long time. So, over the course of a 12-game season, how many red zone plays are you going to have? You're averaging about 68 plays a game, in college football right now. So out of those 68 plays, they all fall into different situations. There's 1.5 third and longs in a game, but then sometimes you're going to get in a game where you have 5 third and longs. But you're also going to get into a game where you don't have any third and longs. So over the course of the season, it averages out to this amount of snaps per game based on 68, because that's what the average is in the NCAA. We know what the average is in the NCAA. We know what the average is in the NFL, and you kind of go through it. But then there are going to be games where you have the ball a lot more in the red zone than normally. Then there's other times where you're going to have the ball a lot more coming out than normally, because your defense has done a great job and kind of held up down there and got some really big stops in a red area. Well, then we got to go back on the field offensively, and now we got to go the long distance. So it's over the course of the season, it'll iron itself out in terms of the reps. But in that game, just specifically, we were in a lot more coming outs and a lot more red zones than we were in regular first and second down, and that's not normal in a normal game.
Joey Kaufman, Columbus Dispatch.
Chip, looking at the way Will play, he's been efficient throughout this year, high completion percentage, low turnovers until Michigan. What do you think went wrong for him in some of those moments against Michigan, and sort of how did you look back on it?
We always look back at it from my perspective, so I think I got to do a better job of putting Will in position to make plays. That's how I always look at it. So, and I didn't do that against them.
How would you have done that, or what about those situations were challenging for him?
Excuse me, say that one again.
What about, you said put him in position to make plays better? What about those?
I think the one time when we threw the one pick on the 16-yard line, we were in 7-man protection, so we had 2 guys in protection, only 3 guys out in the route. So maybe we could have gone to a 5-man release, get more guys out into the coverage, so that we could spread the defense out a little bit more. So there's one example.
And final questions, Tim May, Letterman Rowan.
Thank you, Jerry. Coach, I think a lot of us expect to see a little bit more 2-man running back, your two Trey and Quinshon in the game, a lot more than I've seen them this year. I mean, I'm not second guessing that stuff, but if y'all looked at that aspect of the running game too, of showing a little more variety, I know there's more stew in the pot, I would think even at this point. But I know it sounds like a basic question, but I'm just wondering what your thinking is there.
No, it's not a basic question, but they both basically play the same position. So neither one of those guys is a fullback. So we're not you're not going to line up Trey at fullback and Q at tailback, or vice versa. So that's not, sometimes when people talk about 2-back offenses, one guy is a fullback and one guy is a tailback, where both of those guys are basically tailbacks. So they both kind of play the same position. And then we're really a 1-back offense, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end as our base personnel, 11 personnel in the game. So we change it up a little bit. We get into some 12, we get into some 13. We'll get into a little bit of 20. They've been in a few times together, but not as much. But the other thing is that when both of those guys are in the game at the same time, when they need a blow, then who are you sending into the game also? So, depth sometimes is a factor when you're making those determinations of, what personnels are we going to deploy in against the teams that we're playing. What is the evidence that when you put 21 in the game against this team, you're going to elicit this type of defense? How are they going to play it and what are they going to do? So making personnel decisions at the beginning of a week in terms of putting stuff into a game plan really is based upon what has this defense done versus 21 personnel or 20 personnel leading up into this game, and what can we anticipate that they will play if we put these 2 guys in at the same time.
Yeah, quick follow. But you're going against a talent, like you said, a very talented defense, it looks like, definitely on video. How important is it, and this is another basic question, to show stuff you haven't shown before, in a basic sense?
Yeah, I don't know. Think
You
it's.
understand what I'm saying?
I do understand what you're saying, but I don't think you go into it to show. We need to show things we haven't shown before. We need to show things that are productive. So I could line up some really wacky formations next Saturday night, but if they don't gain a yard, it doesn't matter what it looks like. What's the most important thing is the productivity, and are we gaining positive yards? Are we efficient on first down so that we can get into workable third down situations and then continue to get drives going? And I think with this group, if we can usually when we get that first down, then we can start moving the football and start playing at our pace and our tempo and kind of what we want to do to dictate the course of the game. But changing personnel is part of that, and there's opportunities to do some of that stuff.
We do have one final question, Bill Landis, Kings of the North.
Chip, on the subject of just running it inside, not super efficiently against Michigan, how much of that was they have really good defensive tackles, maybe it's a bad matchup, or do you need to rethink at all how you guys run the ball now that you're on version like 4 or 5 of your offensive line?
Yeah, I think you always have to play to the strengths of what your players can do, but it also is part of who you're playing. Also, you know, they did have 2 really talented inside players. They also have 2 really talented defensive ends that I don't think get enough credit. And if you look at the statistics from both of those guys on the field and their ability to set edges is part of the decision there. So you're always trying to put your players in position to make plays, and that's what we got to continue to do.
Is it hard to change? If you have to, I don't want to speak for you, but if you have to somewhat significantly change the way that you run the ball, sort of like what you hang your hat on based on your offensive line personnel, how difficult is that to do it on the fly, like in the middle of the season, or even now when you have, 2.5 weeks to prepare? Is it still difficult to change that kind of thing on the fly when you have 12 games of a body of work building?
That's just how it works. You know, when you lose players, you got to see who you're adding. When you lose a Seth and you lose a Jimmy, you know, and then what are their strengths, and then how do we play to those strengths and be able to take advantage of them. But you can't ask them to do things that maybe Jimmy and Seth did because they're not Jimmy and Seth. But that doesn't mean you're not going to come up with a game plan. You know, you're always going to figure it out, and we're going to get a chance to, you know, the longer they get to play together, the more continuity that they have, you know, where Donnie feels really comfortable, you know, out at tackle, and he's done a great job. The transition that he's made going from guard to tackle is, even though it's one spot over, it's an entirely new position. So, you know, what Carson has done stepping in and doing a really good job at center, you know, stepped in the Penn State game, played guard, then had to jump in and go play center. But, you know, I think everybody that's involved in this playoff right now understands it. You know, for us to win it all, we got to play 4 more games. You know, and so to think that no one else is going to get injured in those next 4 games is, you know, you're burying your head in the sand. So we got to be prepared for it, and we got to be ready to go. And I think the team that can handle the attrition part of this the best may end up being the team that wins the whole thing. So, you know, we've been aware of that since it started. We knew it's either going to be a 16 or 17 game schedule, you know, to win the whole thing. So you got to go with what you got, and we'll continue to look for things that we can do to help those players out, and it's on us to put those guys in position to make plays, because these guys have practiced their tails off and are excited about this opportunity about playing Tennessee.
Great. Coach, thank you very much.